Last week, Justin Trudeau had a very bad week. He had Jagmeet Singh rip up his agreement with him. He left the coalition, the Supply and Confidence Agreement. He had Jeremy Broadhurst, his national campaign director, announce he was leaving. And just for icing on the cake, the unemployment rate rose to 6.6%. How has his week been this week? Andrew Perez is a strategist and Liberal consultant who has worked on campaigns provincially and federally in the past. Joins me now to talk about that. Andrew, last week, bad for Trudeau. This week, he's getting some good headlines around Mark Carney, but he's got other issues around the caucus meeting and people talking about his future. So is it a positive week for Trudeau, a negative week? Is it neutral? Is he surviving? What's your take?
Yeah, I would say so far, and the week's not yet over, I would say neutral so far. I do think that the Carney story was a neutral to positive story. Obviously, the Conservatives jumped on it, calling him carbon tax Carney. But at the end of the day, it ends the speculation around will he or won't he. He's now in a formal relationship with this government, albeit in a Liberal Party advisory capacity. He's not a taxpayer-funded employee, so that's not an issue. And obviously, I do think it bodes well for Mr. Trudeau to bring on Mr. Carney, in spite of the litany of challenges he's faced in the last year, to be able to attract a high-ranking economic leader of Mr. Carney's caliber is a significant feat. So I think that bodes well. Now, with the caucus retreat, not all MPs are there. We saw on the first day of the caucus retreat, longtime MP Alexandra Mendez from the Montreal region,
She's well respected, powerful inside the Quebec caucus.
going public. And, in spite of her saying that, she personally wants the prime minister to stay, and she's so grateful for his record and what he's done. She didn't mince words. It was pretty clear that she wants him to leave. That's clearly the message of her constituents. I really appreciated that candid commentary from Miss Mendez. We'll see if her colleagues follow suit. I'm not holding my breath, Brian. This is an extremely docile caucus that has not, with the exception of Mendez and Wayne Long, who went public in June, and Mr. Long is not running again. Miss Mendez is the deputy speaker of the House of Commons. So these are backbench MPs that don't fear any reprisals from the center, the PMO, if you will. So, I'm not all that impressed. I'm waiting for more members of parliament to speak to media.
There have been leaks and sniping from unnamed MPs. So they don't have the courage of their convictions in believing that Trudeau should go, but they're willing to go to journalists who are at the caucus retreat and say, hey, by the way, piss. Hey, here's my little secret. Don't use my name. I think more, if they feel that way, they should be saying it up front. That's what the Martin guys did to Jean Chrétien. Of course, long term, it didn't work out for Paul Martin, but you've been on the record for quite a while that for the good of the Liberal Party, you don't say this as someone who wants the Liberals to fail. You say this is someone who wants the Liberals to succeed. Trudeau needs to go.
That's right. And I appreciate, hearkening back to the Martin Chrétien era. David Hurley on the Hurley Burley podcast just this week was saying the state of the Liberal caucus then and now is night and day. 22 years ago, Hurley and Paul Martin's advisors were essentially trying to bribe some of Martin's ardent supporters to keep quiet and not go to media day in and day out. That is not an issue today. MPs are not willing to go public. As you say, there are some, anonymous MPs speaking. I do hope we'll see with the by-election in La Salle-Mar-Verdun on September 16th. What is the result of that by-election? Will that impact the leadership question? And I also think, and I think this is beginning to be discussed, that the end of the supply and confidence agreement actually helps Mr. Trudeau and actually puts more of an iron grip it strengthens his grip on the leadership of the party, because now we're back into a conventional minority parliament situation where the government could fall at any time. And so, absent prorogation, which is a tool in the toolkit of prime ministers, we saw Harper do that in 2008 in the
We
midst of the
saw Trudeau
coalition.
use it during the WE scandal.
That's true. Now I'm suggesting a prorogation that would last several months, more akin to the prorogation that Dalton McGuinty pulled in the height of the gas plant scandal that you will recall in the fall of 2012. That's really the precedent that I believe could
So,
be used here.
so explain that to people. Explain what McGuinty did and what you've called for Trudeau to do, and why that matters.
So, I mean, just to be clear, Brian, I'm not calling on Trudeau to do that. I'm merely pointing out that should the prime minister decide to resign, which I do think he should, this would be a tool in his toolkit that he could use to put the pause button on Parliament and allow for a leadership race so that the party would not constantly be worried about losing a vote in the House. And so McGuinty, actually a rather comparable situation at the very end of his 9 years in power, in the midst of the gas plant scandal at Queen's Park, in a minority parliament, uh, prorogued and at the same time announced his resignation. He would remain as premier until his successor was selected. He called for a leadership race. And 2, 3 months later, Kathleen Wynne won that leadership race, elected at a delegated convention, was sworn in as premier, announced the cabinet, and brought in a budget, governed for 15 months in a minority parliament with the support of Andrea Horwath's NDP. And I actually recall this vividly because I was working in Wynne's office at the time. Horwath laid down the gauntlet, said she wouldn't support the government anymore in April of 2014. Wynne didn't wait to be defeated in the ledge. She went straight to the lieutenant governor and asked for an election.
And
And
then
she
she
won a
won
majority.
she won a big majority at that point. So
Now, am I
that,
suggesting that can be replicated? Unlikely, but it's always interesting to look at history.
it is one scenario. I'm still not in the camp that says Justin Trudeau will go. I think he's sticking around. And the bit that you mentioned, and many people have said, well, what does he do after the by-election? He can't prorogue. He can't bring Parliament back, lose the by-election, and then prorogue the House. That would look more panicked than if you prorogue now. If he prorogues now and doesn't do what you've described and resign and call for a leadership race, if he just prorogues, which was all the rumor last week after Sain left the coalition deal, that makes them look like they're panicking. Not that they're looking for a reset, but like they are worried about what's going to happen. So I think we're coming back on Monday, and I think that the Liberals very much could lose LaSalle Imard Verdun to the NDP and their Palestinian flag waving candidate down there. Craig Sauvé really disappointed me with that. But let's keep it on the Liberals, and I'll ask you about Melanie Joly. I've described her as being on Team Hamas for quite some time. She goes further than the Prime Minister ever does, but he obviously gives her that leeway. And yesterday she went out and announced a further escalation of an arms embargo against Israel, including trying to stop the Americans from selling items that they purchased from Canada and Canadian military contractors and passing them on to Israel. She wants that stopped. I'm not sure that the Americans will look very kindly on that kind of order coming from Canada. In fact, I think it will damage relations, but it further takes Canada away from Israel. Were you surprised she did that?
Not overly surprised, Brian. I saw, educated, informed people saluting the decision on social media. I saw many opposing it. I think there's a reasonable debate to be had on what the Canadian government should do almost a year into this war, and I'm publicly a very strong supporter of Israel, but it has been a devastating war in Gaza with a death toll of over 40,000 now. So there are debates to be had around this. I'm not suggesting that what Joly announced was the right course of action. I do have reservations about that, and its implications for Canadian foreign policy, and it could set a dangerous precedent. What I'm concerned about from a Liberal Party perspective is a high-profile cabinet minister and I'm not saying this is the case, but it might be the case, using her prestigious portfolio to advantage a likely leadership bid. So is this policy announcement going to benefit Ms. Joly in a future leadership race whereby she's looking to use the Israel-Hamas war as a wedge to gain support among pro-Palestinian Canadians who might never have been involved in the Liberal Party but will join the party merely because of that issue and that wedge? And I don't think that's healthy for Canadian democracy, and I don't think it's healthy for the Liberal Party. I think we need a vigorous renewal and leadership race that's based on domestic policy and the future of our party, not a foreign conflict.
But okay, well, I'll leave you on this. I think that is exactly part of what she's doing. And I think that if Trudeau did resign right now and there was a leadership race, this would be one of the defining issues as Joly tries to win the leadership of Canada's most successful political party in our history, the Liberals. She would try and win based on a war happening in the Middle East.
So I don't know that that's the case. You think it's the case. You might be right. I don't know that for sure. I'm merely speculating that if that's at play, and I highly
okay,
doubt.
then let me ask you in a way that you'd be more comfortable answering. Is that healthy for the Liberal Party if what I described turns out to be the case?
Yeah, no, and I think I was pretty clear in my initial comments that that's my worry here. And another senior minister could do it in a different way. It could be related to, Champagne could be announcing policies that could, and I mean, in some respect, that's well within their purview as cabinet ministers. People have used cabinet posts to advance leadership ambitions. Paul Martin used the finance ministry for nearly a decade to position himself to be the heir apparent. So I'm not clutching my pearls here, but on a consequential issue such as the war between terrorist group Hamas and Israel, I do worry that you're correct, Brian, and I think that's not acceptable and creates a precedent for the Liberal Party. We don't have paid memberships. Your listeners and viewers should know that. You could sign up for the Liberal Party today in a second. No credit card, no payment needed. And so I do worry that a future leadership race could be grounds for diaspora politics being played in our own backyard. And it's not good for the country, it's not good for democracy, and it's not good for the Liberal Party.
All right. Andrew, thanks so much for the time. We'll ask the listeners what they think. Drop a comment down below, share this on social media, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.